Oh, screen share. Entire screen. All right, so where we left off last week, we were talking about how the brain functions in terms of firing neurons and kind of like the physical sensations that goes on, the biological sensations that go on within our brain, okay, and throughout our body. So today we're going to start connecting a little bit more of the cognitive functions and how we get the outside world into our brain, right? Because ESP, as far as we know, is not a very scientific way for us to explain how we get information into our brains, right? It may exist, but we don't know. We don't have really a way to gauge that and reproduce those results. So, what are some ways that we get the outside world into our brain, into our minds, and start processing? Vision, hearing, okay. What else? Touch. Two other ones. Taste and smell, okay? So those are our 5 basic senses. And I'm gonna kind of go through them with you. Before we do that, I'm gonna shut the lights off here. Has anybody seen this before? All right, how many of you have not seen this before? Just one, really? Okay, this has been around for a while, and it has baffled psychologists for a very long time, for almost a decade, I think. How many of you see a blue dress? How many of you see a white dress? Okay, a little higher, white dress. And blue dress. Okay, how many see both? Okay. You see white and gold. Okay, yeah, yeah. For me, I see black and blue. Oh, really? Okay, well, let me see. Does that change anything for anybody? Okay, okay. Yeah, so for me, I see the black ruffles here, or black lace, and then blue shirt. So why does this happen? Has anybody looked it up to try and explain why this phenomenon? Okay. One of the explanations that we've come up with and it really holds true is this dress is on the cusp of our cones and within our retina. Okay, and I'll explain what those are. So it's almost blue in a certain light, and it's almost white in a certain light, and just depending on who you are, and how your eyeballs are set up, your cones are set up, determines on what you see. Okay, so show of hands one more time. Who sees white? And who sees blue? Okay, okay. I would say a majority of the guys, the males in this room, see blue. Why is that? Maybe it could be because of the structure of the eyes. We're still trying to piece together exactly what happens, but we do know that it is on the cusp of what we know how the cones function within the retina. Hey, so fun little experiment. So the process of getting the outside world into our brains is called transduction. Okay, and that's just using our senses to build a picture of what's happening around us. You know, either through movement or through just looking at something stationary or hearing something. And when we get into hearing, I've got some cool little experiments to explain how cognition occurs. So a fun little fact here, synesthesia. How many of you have heard of that before? So, yeah, yeah. It's when you can taste colors or you can hear colors. What do I mean by that? How can you hear colors? Right, right. Exactly. So maybe you hear music and music produces a color sensation for you. So it's using taking one sense and turning it into various senses. Okay. Maybe you can smell like colors. One of the things I like to do in therapy is have people imagine what color calm is and what color anxiety is. Okay, so for many of you, maybe some of you have similar ideas. So if I'm telling you to breathe in calm air, what color would that look like for you? White. Okay. Any other? Light blue. Okay. I get green. I get blue. I haven't heard white before. That's interesting. Yeah, but for many of us, it might be a little bit different. We have colors that we associate with anxiety or anger. Like anger, what do we look at anger as being? Yeah. What's that? Black and red. Okay. Okay. So for many of us, it could be sociological. You know, we just picked up on what these colors mean for us, or it could just be embedded, ingrained in us. Okay. So anyway, that's just a fun little fact with synesthesia. So sensations are the activation of receptors in our various organs. It could be our eyes, it could be our ears, it could be our nose, it could be our taste buds, it could be our pain and touch receptors. That's sensation. Now, later on Thursday, we're going to talk about perception. Now, perception is a little bit different. Why? So sensation is taking the information in. Perception's putting it out. Right. It's how we process it, right? So we get all that information in, and then we work with it to process it in some way that's meaningful to us. All right. So in order to understand how senses occur, I know your book, I'm doing things a little bit backwards because it goes right into vision. But it's important to understand how sensation occurs, because remember we talked about firing of neurons, right? Is it gradual? Do we have a little bit more electric impulses go through, or is it just a firing or not firing? What do you think? You remember? Firing or not firing? All or nothing, right? And that's important to understand as we get into absolute threshold, okay? Because we can't really determine, our brain doesn't really switch based on one neuron firing, okay? It doesn't tell us, hey, we've got a fire going here. We got something going on. We've got our arm is about ready to be lopped off just because of one neuron firing. It doesn't happen that way. Okay, it takes multiple activations of our senses, of our neurons, in order for it to produce some kind of signal. Okay, and the best way to really describe this is if you take a pin on somewhere on your arm and barely touch it, you may not feel that pin. Okay, because you do have pain receptors in your arm, but they're so spread out that the chances of you actually activating a meaningful sensation is very, very slim to none. Now, if you put it on your finger, you're probably going to experience a little bit more, okay? And your body's going to tell you, hey, something's firing here, something's going on. This is what we know as absolute threshold. And this is going to really play a big part in what you know across all 5 of our senses. So absolute threshold is the least energy for correct stimulus detection at 50% of the time. And what do I mean by that? So when I say 50% of the time, that means if I reproduce the same stimulus over and over and over again, and you as the subjects are able to respond to that stimulus at least 50% of the time, that's what we know is the absolute threshold. Okay. How many of you have had hearing tests before? Okay. What do they do in the hearing test? What are they looking for? How high or how low? They're testing your range, or to see if you have any holes in your auditory senses, in your ears. Okay. What they're doing and how they're testing that is they're reproducing like a really low tone. Sometimes you think you hear it, right? Sometimes you don't necessarily hear it, but it's going off. That would be your threshold. Yeah.
And sometimes you hear it all the time.
You hear it all the time, right? Yeah. Yeah. They trick you with that stuff, but they're doing the exact same thing. They're testing your absolute threshold, and they'll repeat it time after time to see if you can detect it at least 50% of the time. If it goes below that 50%, then obviously you're not detected it. You're not hearing it. Okay. Just noticeable difference is the smallest difference detectable at 50% of the time, okay? Which is something that occurs. So threshold is the energy it takes to produce. Does that make sense? The energy it takes to produce that minimal threshold. Just noticeable difference is the repetition. Okay, did I lose anybody? So just noticeable difference, the JND is smallest detect over time, the repetition of that, and then threshold is the energy. All right. So one of the examples, you know, we talked about the pin, we talked about taste. Maybe some of you have higher taste receptors than a higher threshold of taste receptors in it than others. How many of you like really spicy foods, for example? Okay. How does that play on your senses? How many of you don't like spicy foods? What does it do for you? Burns your mouth, makes you sweat. Okay. Does some nasty things to you, right? Doesn't make you feel good. So for those of you that had your hands up, why do you eat spicy foods? Yeah.
Because I like the way it makes me sweat.
You like the way it makes you sweat. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's like I eat spicy food because the fresh is like beef or
Okay. Okay. It actually releases endorphins in your body. Did you know that? Eating spicy food, watching horror movies does the exact same thing for some people, and there is really a correlation between people who like spicy foods and watch scary movies. So it's an endorphin rush for some people. They get a almost like a runner's high by eating spicy foods, but you like the way it makes you sweat, right? So anyway, some of you have higher taste thresholds and it does different things to your body chemically. Okay. Smell. Some of you have different smell. Just kind of a fun fact where we used to be able to smell things really intensely. Okay. We could smell things from, you know, maybe a mile away if there was a threat out there. Why has that diminished over time, do you think? Yeah.
our eyes got better.
Our eyes got better. Okay. All right. Oh, interesting. So like more chemicals in the air is probably like dulled our senses. Okay. Evolutionarily, why do you think smell is not that important to us? Do we need it to survive anymore? We've kind of lost that gene over time, right? We don't require smell to sniff out danger. For humans, especially, do we have really any natural enemies out there? Maybe poison, right? Or gas. We can smell gas or poison in the air. It's kind of a bitterness or metallic smell. But by and large, we don't require smell to survive. Okay. How about hearing and vision? Do we need hearing and vision to survive? For most of us, yeah, right. Those are probably our two biggest senses, our vision and hearing, because we can see and hear things from longer distances. Whereas touch, it's important that we have those pain receptors, but not nearly as important for survival because we can't really touch or feel anything that's beyond our reach. Okay, unless the wind is blowing or something, right? So that's just kind of the breakdown of our senses, and we're going to go into vision and hearing quite a bit. Touch, we'll we'll touch upon that, and taste and smell, we'll talk about a little bit. But we're going to spend a lot of time with vision and hearing. All right. So, how many of you heard of subliminal messages? Okay, what are they? What happens? What's the science behind it that we think? Yeah.
Basically, the idea is that it implants an idea in your head, and you may or may not follow suit on it.
Okay. Okay. Have we tried that historically in the past?
It happens like every day.
Okay. In what way?
Like in movies, commercials, TV shows, and stuff. And just like walk across like
Okay, so what do advertisements sell? Yeah.
Oh, they try to sell you an idea that you need something.
Okay. So they want us to think that we need something like what are the things that we use in advertisement to really sell products? It kind of changes from era to era, generation to generation. So what today is something that we use subliminal messaging for?
Like how, like in some kitchens or something, they'll show the kid using like an Apple product, so the kid will be like, I need that, with that Apple product.
Okay, so it might be a popularity thing, right? So if you see other people doing it, that makes us want to do it, right? So that could be a subliminal message. There were some ideas back in the past. Yeah.
I don't know, I may be off on this one, but I mean, they always use attractive people, right?
Okay, attraction.
Kind of, you need to belong to this group of very attractive people. If you use this product, you're that much closer.
Okay, so we look at attraction, right? What makes a person attractive? We have ideas, we have models that do popular things, which make us want to do popular things. And we're going to talk much more about that when we get into social psychology. And if any of you are interested in that stuff, I'm teaching social psychology next semester, which I do. I love doing all sorts of experiments with this stuff and talking about these things because it's in our face all the time. So subliminal messages. It was Coca-Cola was really a big proponent of subliminal messaging, and they still are today. Maybe not in the terms that that they used to do it. Like back in the 70s, they used to show their advertisement, their TV commercials, and they would flash a word like drink Coke or something like that. I forget what it was, but it would flash for a split second. Did it work? Didn't. And here's why. Because it flashed so quickly, it fell below that just noticeable difference. So nobody could really process it. It didn't work. I mean, they caught a lot of flack for trying to psychologically mess with people, but for the by and large, excuse me, it did not. It doesn't work because you have to be able to see it in order for that to happen. Okay. So habituation, another term to be familiar with, is the brain stops responding to certain stimuli. Okay, and I had a fun little experiment. If I had a speaker in here, I would have tried it. I've done it with some of my other classes. I have a tone that plays as soon as they come in, and some people recognize it, some people don't. But after a while, students become habituated to it. They become accustomed to hearing that all the time. Like, how many of you, when you first got here, heard the bell ringing? Okay. How many of you still hear it every hour? I was outside all day yesterday, and I missed probably at least half of them. Didn't hear them because I was so used to hearing them by now. Yeah.
I honestly thought you guys were all joking about there being a bell here. I have never once heard that thing. I'm just heard of its legend.
Okay.
No, never once have I ever heard this thing.
Okay.
I
Okay.
wish you guys were all messing with me, really.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
So is it that you can't hear it, or that you're just
No, I
used to it?
thought was somebody trying to be funny, like, oh, the bell's gonna be in a little bit, and I'm like, yeah, the bell, gotcha.
Okay. So is it that you've just been around for a while and you're used to hearing it? Interesting. Okay. All right. We could see that with like a TikTok in our house. How many of you grew up with a grandfather clock or something in your house? Do you hear it anymore? Yeah, do you still hear it? Do you hear it when you're not with it? Some people. Okay. Okay. It took me like years. I just heard the TikTok forever, and it's kind of weird when you don't hear it anymore. But anyway, so that's an example of habituation when you're just so used to hearing something that it's just normal for you. So habituation is a little different than sensory adaptation. Okay, sensory adaptation is the biological explanation for why we don't sense something. Okay, it could be like a severed neuron. It could be some kind of disease. Any of you that have or have had known that people that had COVID, what happens to their sense of smell? Gone, right? Or diminished, at least. That doesn't mean that they're used to smelling those things. It means that there's some kind of neuropathy going, some neurological degradation going because of biological explanations. Okay. So that's really the difference between habituation and sensory adaptation. So habituation is we just get used to hearing it, and our mind just says, it's not a threat anymore. And we do that. And I think I've told you this before. We as humans, let's see if anybody caught this. We as humans are two things. What are we? Maybe I haven't told the class this yet. We are lazy. We are prideful. Okay. You're going to hear me refer to that, especially when we get into mental health. It's a protection mechanism for us. And when I say lazy, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just a term I could think of, the one word term. We like to create routine. Okay. We have to create routine. Our minds are built to run efficiently. So we find the easiest way to do things, and we build in these routines so that we can focus on newer stimuli, newer things that might be a threat to us. Okay. So like for example, if we hear a tick-tock or a bell ringing or something like that, that's new to us. We get into habituation so we can free up our senses, free up our energy, so we can focus on more important threats in the outside world. Okay. So that's the reason we do that. And when we get into motivation and personality, I'll talk a little bit more about the pride thing of it. But keep in mind, everything we do is because we want to be more efficient. Okay, our brain thrives on that. All right, so let's go into vision. I'm gonna turn these off here. All right, so we as humans, we're designed to see colors. Okay, we're built to see colors because colors help us relate to the outside world, help us take in information. We don't really have a sense, we don't have a need to see black and white like some animals do. Okay, some animals naturally see that. And to give you an example of what we can and cannot see, how many of you see a threat in that image? A threat, yeah. There's something hidden in that image. Now, if you were a dog or a deer, you would catch us immediately. Anybody? You see a person. Where do you see a person? In the middle? Okay. Maybe I'll see a person. Where? Uh-huh. To the left? Okay. Okay. Okay, maybe. So that was supposed to be a panther, okay? But you can't really see that. Can you see the panther here now? All right. That link is probably not helping. Let's see, move that off to the side there. All right, you see it now? Now, if you were something that was worried about a predator attacking, you would have a keener sense. The rods in your retina would have picked up on that almost immediately. Okay, and that's why certain animals have a better sense of survival because they can see. Do you hear the bell? Now you hear it. Okay. All right. So anyway, yeah, it's a clock tower. But anyway, that's part of, as humans, we have developed a keener sense of vision in terms of color because we need color. We need more color to survive than we do black and white. We don't have a need for this. So it's devolved over time with humans. Okay. And now my clicker's broken. There we go. All right. So so a little bit of science behind light in the eye. So obviously we have an energy spectrum. And that energy spectrum is really separated by wavelengths. And within our eyeballs, within our retinas, we can differentiate how the sun, I'm not going to go in too much into the science of how colors are produced, but when prism light, full spectrum white light, hits an object, it either absorbs some of those wavelengths, or it reflects some of those wavelengths, and our eye picks up on those wavelengths. Okay, and this just kind of gives you an idea of where our visible light appears for us. Okay, we have infrared. Some of us, has anybody like ever used a camera and held a remote to it, and you see like the beam, no, like a television remote? What happens? Yeah, you see the LED flash, right? That's because your camera is picking up infrared. It's picking up light waves that your eyeballs can't see. Okay, so that again, that exists on the cusp of something that we can and cannot see. And there have been a few people that say that they can see like a deeper red, but it's not quite infrared. Okay, ultraviolet, again, invisible light. It's something that's on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's shorter wavelengths that we can't detect. All right, so some of the properties that we can use to describe light is brightness, which correlates to the intensity, the level of light that's being reflected back to us. We have color, which depends on where in the wavelength that on the visible spectrum that it exists for us. And we have saturation, the purity of the color. Okay, and you don't have to really get into these. Again, I'm just kind of talking about how colors are formed. But what I do want you to be familiar with is how we take in that light through our retina. Okay, so when we see an image, it comes in through our lens, and it focuses through our pupil and reflects, projects on the back of our retina. Okay, so the retina is pretty much this whole area in the back of the eyeball. Okay, so within this field here, we have cones and rods, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. But all of our optic nerves are in this area. Okay, and when we get light in there, it detects. It starts detecting shapes. It looks at shapes. It looks at colors. It looks at intensity. It looks at many things, and depending on how those nerves occur or how those nerves fire, sends that information to the back of our brain. Okay, and right outside the retina is what we have a blind spot. Kind of a fun little experiment for you to do. Any of you, all of you have paper out. What I'd like you to do is put maybe get a fresh piece of paper, or maybe at the top of your notebook or something, put a nice dark dot on like maybe the center top of your paper. So if I had paper here, so right about here, nice dark dot. And then over here, make an X, nice dark X, maybe not too big. Now, what I'd like you to do is look at the X and just stare, focus only on the X, and move your paper until that dot disappears. What's that? Yeah. All right. So if this was my X right here, look at it and move it. Focus on the X and move it front and forward and backwards until that dot disappears. Slowly. How many of you are able to make the dot disappear? Okay, a couple of you. You might just do it really slow. If you do it too quick, it'll appear and reappear, disappear and reappear. Trying it again. What's that? No, if you stare at this X. All right, so right about there for me, it disappears. So what's happening? What's happening in that moment is that small dot is focusing over your optic, your blind spot, your optic nerve. Okay, because there's really nothing here at this opening. This is where your nerves go out to the rest of your retina. So there's really no nerves here whatsoever able to detect that that black dot. Okay. So a fun little experiment for you to do. Let's see. I'm not going to go into nearsighted and farsighted. All right. So within the optic nerves, we have two types. We have cones and we have rods. Okay. So the cones are located more towards the optic nerves because they're more sensitive to wavelengths. So we see colors with the cones. Okay. As we go away from the optic nerve, we're going to have more. This is your optic nerve. These are going to be the focus of your cones, and these are going to be the rods on the outside of that. Okay. Now the rods are designed for lower level light because we don't need color in dark situations, right? We need to be able to see if light exists or if it doesn't exist. We can be able to make out figures based on what we can see with our black and white vision. Okay. So once we get the visual through our eyeballs, they go through our optic nerve and then go to what part of the brain? What lobe? You remember from last week? Anybody? Go back in your notes. What part of the brain is responsible for vision? I know it says visual cortex on there, but where is the visual cortex located? Occipital lobe, absolutely. So it goes to your occipital lobe, specifically your visual cortex, your right cortex and your left cortex. Why do we need two different cortexes? Why do we need two sides of vision in our occipital lobe, do you think? We have two eyes, right? What do two eyes help us do? Right? Give us a wider periphery, right? Helps us detect how close or how far something is. Right. So our field of vision gets a little bit wider with two. So your brain helps you compare and contrast that vision, that visual that's happening, that image, and it tells us, is it moving? Is it stationary? Is it close? Is it far? Is it getting closer to us? And we've learned over time, when we get into learning, we've learned over time that certain things mean certain things for us. Like if we see something that's going on, it might mean it's a threat for us. Like if I threw a ball at you right now, what would your reaction be? You see something getting bigger, you know it's coming at you. You're probably going to duck or swat at it or throw it back at me, probably, right? If you could catch it. So that's what happens in the visual. That's why we have two parts of the brain, is it helps us compare and contrast and constantly talks to each other to produce three-dimensional and movement for us. All right, so dark and light adaptation. So it takes a couple seconds for us to really get used to switch between our cones and our rods. Okay, so cones again deal with color, and when we take away that color immediately, it takes a little bit for our eyes to adapt to that. Usually around 30 seconds. How many of you have gone from a light room into a dark room and then bumped into something? Right, we've all probably done that. It takes a while for us to build up, adapt to our environment and see and adjust our vision to see what's occurring in that room. So, and it could take up to 30 seconds, maybe up to a minute for some people. What happens when you're driving on the road at night and somebody drives by you with high beams? What does that do to your vision? It blinds you, right? Because now your eyes are trying to switch and say, hey, I need to see color. And then it goes away. And then you're left struggling to drive straight or stay on the road. Could create a dangerous situation. Light adaptation, the same thing, right? When you go from a dark room into a light room, what happens? You're blinded. It takes a while for you you're probably trying to squint and until your pupils adjust. All right. So in regards to color, there are a couple theories that we use to explain why we see colors the way we do. And one of them is the trichromatic theory. Trichromatic theory says that we basically have 3 types of cones within our retina, and that's red, blue, and green. Okay. So any variation, depending on how light the wavelengths cross those 3 cones, very similar to how we produce television signals, right? Remember the old cathode ray? Maybe some of you don't remember those, the big tube TVs. How many of you, how long have those been gone? How many of you have never seen or owned a tube TV? Okay, so just about everybody. I don't know. So sometimes it surprises me what people don't know used to exist, like modems, the old dial-up modems. Yeah, things that have kind of gone away in the past. So anyway, at some point, I'm sure I'm going to be around when nobody's, what the heck is an 8-track or a tube TV? But tube TVs do a very similar thing. They have 3 rays that they blast, and based on the intensity of those, they can produce pretty much a wide range of colors. Many of your LED TVs do the exact same thing. They have 3 colors, red, blue, and green, that fire in certain sequence and certain intensities that produce a wide range of colors for us. We'll get purples, we'll get browns, we'll get pinks and whites and whatever else. So that's really the trichromatic theory, and it really posits that that's how we see different colors. So if we're deficient in any one of those, it could lead to color blindness. Okay, so some people might not be able to see shades of green or shades of blue or even shades of red, or even more rare, all 3. That's really a rare thing if somebody has complete color vision, color blindness. Does anybody know anybody that's colorblind? Yeah, okay. What colors are they not able to see? Red and green? Okay, so 2 of them. Okay. You don't think you could see what?
No colors at all.
Really? Okay. I haven't met anybody that couldn't see any color. Usually it's like a variation or 1 or 2 of them. But yeah, that's interesting. So if he couldn't see any color, if your teacher couldn't see any color, do you think you would have been able to pick out that panther? Probably, right? Because we're used to seeing color. We're used to picking out our threats or detecting our threats through color. And if you don't have those colors, you're going to be a little bit more adaptable to, like, for example, how can you drive if you can't see red lights or green lights? You got to go off the traffic. Okay. How does your friend detect a green light? Yeah, you can tell when the light's on, right? You can see if it's off, on or up. Now, if in America, it's pretty common that we have red, yellow, green, right? So if you know the bottom one is lit up, it's probably green. Or if it's something you can't see and it's lit up, it's probably green. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they actually dealt with this a long time ago. Believe it or not, they actually thought about, hey, people aren't going to be able to see these colors, so they just made them a lot more vivid.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So you can see what the. Okay. But you know which one's lit up. Yeah. So you've people that are that live with color blindness learn to adapt using other senses, right? Using the intensity or the shades. It might be a shade of a different.
Yeah, I usually can't. Something with blue and green is a little screwy too. So I see. It's kind of like
Okay, okay. Let's see if I had, I don't think I have a activity on this one. So I had something to show you how we can detect color blindness, because certain jobs require us to be able to see colors. Like, for example, what job do we really need to be able to see colors with? Engineering, okay. Electrician, right? You want to get your yellow and green wires mixed up, yeah.
Just gonna point out, I used to repair appliances as well, and those wires are all labeled. If you look, it will
Okay.
say
Okay, okay. Any like graphic artists, right? You have to be able to see colors with that. When I was when I served in the Air Force, Army, probably the same thing. They checked you for color blindness, and it didn't mean that you couldn't join. I mean, it used to be that way. I think a while back, if you had certain color blindness, you couldn't really enter the military services, especially in the Air Force. That was a big deal, because you have to be able to, again, you have to be able to see wires. You have to be able to pick things out of the sky or pick things out on videos, right? So color blindness might inhibit certain jobs and put lives at risk. So that was trichromatic theory. The other theory that we use is the opponent processing theory, which states that we have two cones within our retinas that detect either green or red or blue and yellow. Okay, and one is activated, the other one is not. So what that means is if we see an image that comes somewhere between here and here, based on the two cones that we're using, it might produce an orange color. Okay, one of the things that they use to justify this is an after image. Okay, so if you look directly at that white spot, okay, everybody train on that. Look at it, stare at it. Nice. Give you maybe a couple seconds just to train on it a little. All right, you ready? What'd you see? Okay, okay. So check it out again. How many of you saw those colors change? Okay, no tricks here. How many of you seen this before? Okay, so no tricks here. I'm not doing anything. I'm giving you a yellow, black, and green image, and then I'm taking it away. Okay. So what opponent processing theory is telling us is that we're activating. So go back to oops. We're activating our green and yellow. Oh, come on. There we go. So we're activating our green and yellow, and when we take it away and blast you with bright white light, it reverts, it recoils and gives you the red, white, and blue sensation. Okay, so that's opponent processing theory. All right. Let's see. So hearing. Any questions on vision, or anybody want to have anything they want to add? We're going to go a little bit more into why we see things the way we do and what we do with that information when we get into perception. Okay. Right now, this is kind of just a refresher on biology, if any of you have taken that. So hearing, obviously, again, like vision, we have certain wavelengths that we can detect with our ears. Okay. Now, unlike our vision, our vision tends to go, but not nearly as easily as our hearing. Why is that? How does our hearing diminish? What are ways that we okay, so if you're constantly blasting yourself with loud noises, that could affect your hearing in the long term. So that really reduces our pitch. The pitches that we hear could be diminished over time based on our hearing degradation. So pitch, it refers to the wavelength, similar to colors, okay? It would be different colors that we see. Pitch would be different tones that we hear, either low going all the way up to high, all right? Amplitude is the power that it's hitting our ears. So we can have a certain pitch. It could go from like low, or it could go low. It depends on the force that it's hitting our ears. So that's referred to as amplitude or decibels. And we look at that in terms of like our volume. When we turn up the volume, we're not changing the pitch of anything. We're just changing the energy that it's hitting our ears by. Okay. And so this, I put this on here because I thought it was pretty interesting to show exactly where things become a little bit more damaging. So if we're prolonged to hearing jets flying over our house, or if we're working on a flight line or something without hearing protection, that could lead to permanent hearing damage, which I'll show you how that would occur here when we look at the ear, the inner ear. So anyway, right around 85 to 90, prolonged exposure to those sounds could lead to prolonged damage. How many of you have heard something that was just absolutely painful before? Well, what was it? Okay. So like the scraping on the chalkboard, like fingernails on a chalkboard, or a piece of chalk on the chalkboard, right? That's kind of an annoyance sound, right? Is that so for you? It creates like a physical sensation of, you know, many of us do that, like scraping plates or knives on a plate or something, right? But how about something that is just so loud that it was absolutely painful? Yeah. Jets. Okay. Sirens, absolutely. What else? Car racing. Okay. Shooting guns. Yeah. Loud screeching noise. Okay. All of these things by design are there to scare us. They create a painful sensation because they want to get our attention, like sirens, for example. Now, if you're around sirens all the time, is that good for your hearing? Probably not. Let's see, where is sirens? Oh, they don't even have sirens on here. I would probably say, you know, it's up here. It's above live music, jackhammer, you know. So a lot of workspaces, what they do is they provide hearing protection for people that are around those noises all the time. All right. So looking at the structure of the ear, it's not a very good, let's see if I got a better structure here for you. Oh, a better one on here. All right, yeah, here we go. All right, so within the structure of the ear, and this is showing a cochlear implant, but so sound waves enter the ear canal, okay? And they vibrate the eardrum, which is this little piece of membrane here. And based on the vibration of the eardrum, it kicks in your these tiny little bones, your timbers, which vibrate your cochlear, okay, which contain a bunch of little hairs in here. Again, I know a lot of you have probably have taken biology before and or anatomy, so you kind of, this is just a little bit of a refresher. So what happens when this vibrates and it swirls, the bigger hairs that are more responsible for lower sounds are on the outside of this of your cochlea, and as they go inner, the hairs get a little finer. So what happens with hearing damage over time is it's what's thought to happen is within that cochlea, those hairs, those tiny little fibers start breaking after being vibrated so much. And that's where hearing loss can occur. You're no longer, those hairs aren't helping you to process that information anymore. All right, so got just a couple things here to go. I want to go over, at least over some of the senses here. I'm not going to go too much into the biology of taste, but we have certain things that we taste, and yeah. You're just stretching. Okay. We have certain flavors that we taste, and that's by design too. If you think from evolutionary standpoints, why is taste important to us? We can taste when stuff is bad. Okay. What about when stuff is good? Like sugar, for example. Why do we have the sensation of sweetness, do you think? Again, think of learning. I know we haven't covered learning yet, how learning occurs, but yeah.
Basically encourages the animal to go get some more.
Right, right. So we know if we taste something sweet and we have a boost of energy and we need that energy, we have learned that we go back to tasting something that's sweet because we need that sugar. Okay. So it's our body's way of saying, hey, I'm feeling a little low on energy. I'm gonna go find like some sugar or candy or something. Yeah.
I think as babies we're introduced to sugar more often too, so like our just sort of natural.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. But anything we're introduced, like salt, we talked about salt, the importance of salt in our body, right? Helps with firing nerves. So we have a salty or bitter that helps us determine whether we need. We've learned that something bitter might be salty, and therefore we crave that. All right, so those are 5 basic tastes. We have salty, sour, bitter, umami, and sweet. Umami helps us with proteins. As again, we need proteins for muscle mass and building our systems up. So, all right. So one of the interesting things I like to point out is the location of our olfactory bulb, our olfactory senses. Olfactory refers to smell and really taste too. But one of the interesting parts of it is the location next to the hippocampus. And our hippocampus is responsible. Does anybody know what hippocampus is responsible for through your reading? I know we didn't really cover it in class, but memory, long-term memory. Okay. How many of you have ever been sick on something before? Like got food poisoning? What was something that you got sick on, Mark? Vienna sausages? Okay. Okay, did you actually throw up? Okay, okay. How about who else had something that made them sick? Yeah, Zoe. Chinese food? Okay. Yeah, what happened with Chinese food? What'd you have? Okay.
Spoiled tuna fish.
Spoiled tuna fish. Okay. What else? Mexican? All right. So various things, right? What happened when you got sick and you went back and either smelled or tried to taste that item again? Were you able to? Well, yours was spoiled tuna. You wouldn't go seek out spoiled tuna, right? But what happened with normal tuna?
Yeah.
Didn't happen? Okay. Mine was orange juice. I got sick off of, I actually didn't even get sick off of orange juice. I ate something the night before and I had orange juice the next morning and got sick. And for almost a year after, I couldn't even smell orange juice. It made me nauseous. Why is that? Why do we do that? Right. And it's because of the olfactory bulb. The intensity of it kicks back memories that, hey, we got sick off of something. And it helps us to survive. So it helps us to not go back to the thing that made us sick before. Okay. So that's one of the little things I'd like to point out is, so how about memories? How about other memories that smells trigger? How many of you get, we were talking about synesthesia, right? So what's that? Horrific injuries with smelling? Oh, okay. No. What? So what are you talking? So pain wise. Okay. Okay, all right. So yeah, certain sensations will trigger memories. No, no, that's all right. What about smells? What sort of smells trigger certain memories for you? Like cooking? Like how many, what sensations, what memories do you conjure up when you smell like cookies baking for some of you? Maybe. Yeah.
Like childhood memories.
Childhood memories, right? Right. Mothballs. Mine's mothballs. Whenever I smell mothballs, I think of my great grandmother's house because it smelled like mothballs. But that's because of the location of the olfactory bulb next to your hippocampus. Right? It helps to produce those memories because, again, and when we go into learning, this will make a lot more sense. We go back to what serves us well, and we stay away from things that harm us. Okay, and that's the purpose of our memory is to learn these things. All right. Somatic senses, or what does it call it? Somesthetic senses or somatic senses are senses that we use for touch. Okay. So we talked about, we had vision, we had hearing, we had taste, and we had smell. Now we're going to talk about our fifth one, which is touch. Our touch, our sense of touch is another way that we get information to our brains. Like, for example, if how many of you have been completely sensory deprived at any point? Like maybe through some kind of training or something? We don't have a lot of military folks out there, but maybe any of you that tried out for police, I think certain career fields, they require you to be sensory deprived, do things in the dark. Okay. You don't have your sight or your hearing available to you, and you have to be able to figure out how to put something together or take something apart. How many of you have done that? Okay.
I went to a house where they had like a little maze.
Okay. So haunted houses, right? Absolutely. You have to find your way around by what, touching walls and stuff. And sometimes they're a little cruel and they have you touch things that aren't pleasant, right? Like something slimy on the wall, or I think one place they had like a pot of spaghetti or something, warm spaghetti. It's just really gross. So anyway, our sense of touch is vital. All right, it's important, but not nearly as widely used as far as getting around, because we have our sight and we have our smell and we have our hearing to help us with that. So within our, let's see, within our touch, we have different receptors within our sense of touch, and those are touch. So we can feel something like if we scraped our fingers together, we would feel that. Okay, that's our touch sense. Pressure is when you push down on those senses. Okay, those pain receptors are telling you, hey, we're being jostled here, something's happening. We have temperature, so we can detect if something's hot or cold. Those pain receptors will, or those receptors will fire off. And then we have pain, when the skin is actually being split or traumatized or something, that fires signals to our brain telling us, hey, something's happening. Again, it's not just one receptor, it's multiple receptors. So the more receptors that are activated, the more it's telling us, hey, something serious is happening here. We got to act on that. Okay. We have our kinesthetic sense. So remember when I was having you touch your fingers together? Okay. That's what that is. We're able to tell how our arms are leveled. We know where our body parts are at any time. How many of you have done that? Like you maybe laid on your leg and you thought that it was out in front of you, but instead it was just like dead behind you. It would just like fell asleep or something. Those are tricks that our body plays on us, not intentionally, but if our foot goes to sleep and we don't have any sensation in there, we don't know where that thing is at times. Okay. But for the most part, we know where our bodies are at any given time. And then we have our vestibular senses. Okay. And that happens within our cochlea, within our brains. It helps us with our sense of balance. How many of you get motion sickness or vertigo? Okay. If you do, it's because of your vestibular senses. It's not matching what you're seeing with what your body is feeling is in terms of movement. And that can make some people really sick or nauseous. Okay. All right. And there's just a image of what some of these receptors look like. So you have your epidermis, your skin here, and then below this you have like your lower epidermis. Okay, so within here, let's see, does this show your nerves? Okay, so you have your touch. These are probably your touch and pressure nerves here on the surface. Okay, and we don't need to really, they don't indicate that we have any pain because we don't need to feel like we have any. Maybe some of you have had paper cuts before, right? Paper cuts are not traumatizing because it's not really getting down to these pain receptors down below the surface. Okay, so we might feel it. We might feel that sense of touch, and we know that we touch something sharp. But for the most part, we're not going to feel the pain from that until we get like tomato juice or something in there, right? And then we feel that. But for the most part, our pain receptors are a little bit in pressure. I'm sorry. Our pain receptors are a little bit deeper within our skin. All right. See, I know I'm running up on time here. Talked about kinesthetic and vestibular senses. All right. That's all I have as far as the senses. Any questions? Like I said, I know this is kind of a recap of biology for you, but this is going to play into how we perceive things on Thursday. So we'll talk about perception and cognition. All right. If there are no other questions, I think a couple of you, I'm going to have you stick around and we're going to look to see what we can come up with for your bright space stuff. All right. Does anybody have any questions? That's all I got for you today. Sorry, I guess I forgot to release you. All right, Sam and Sierra. Stop.